What is up, Arizona Cardinals fans? This is the Redbird Reboot. I'm here as the host of the show with my other host, Marcos Labrada. I am Blake Murphy at Blake Murphy7. He is at Pancake Soul. 4-13 was the case for the Cardinals in the 2022 season. Absolutely miserable season. Likewise, 2023 season. Still a miserable record, but not nearly the sentiment of misery heading into the offseason. We're here to talk about it and a lot of talk about that crazy, encouraging, yet still at the same time interesting game against the Seattle Seahawks. The Seattle Seahawks now looking for a new head coach, which of course shows you that, losing a game you probably should win and winning it only when they miss a field goal is the most Pete Carroll way possible to end this with how good the Seahawks have been in Arizona over the last, I think it was 12 years or so that, I think it's longer than that actually, maybe 13 years that Pete Carroll has been the division rival of the Arizona Cardinals. Marcos, how are you doing today? And then we can hop into just some thoughts, at least on the Cards game and some of the season in general, now that it is complete.
I feel like once the ride is over, we kind of. I'm not sure if people expected us to be 4-13. I guess we were kind of expecting to be worse, or in some instances, some people thought we were going to be better, especially when Kyler Murray came back, that we were going to go more on a run. So we weren't going to even be in this position. So now that it's over, like, to me, I feel relief because not relief of saying, like, okay, the season's over. Like, thank God. Like, I'm not like the Carolina Panthers. I'm talking about as if, like, relief, like now we can get the big picture that I've been talking about like the entire year. Like we need the big picture in order to make that huge assessment, especially on a lot of players, because you're gonna have your games where they're gonna be bad. You're gonna have their games where they're gonna be good, and that's gonna level out. And then you got to see what they do good, and then you got to see what they do bad, and where they need to get work on and not. So now we have all that ability to gain that knowledge, just like your guys' stream last night about the PFF grades. Now you guys have the year, like the year in review PFF grades, so you get the complete picture by looking at the snap counts, the grades, and everything. So it's gives you that complete picture so that we can know what we should do going into the offseason and the draft.
Absolutely. Yes. Some of the grades and everything else that pops up, you can take a look at the season in focus, is something I think we'll spend plenty of time to go through a lot of just the season review. But first, let's talk about how that game went because, Marcos, this was a game that you and I think, both felt maybe not confident, but at least felt that there was a good chance that the Arizona Cardinals were going to knock off the Seattle Seahawks. We felt like the Cardinals' run game team that was on the rise, whereas the Seattle Seahawks were a team that just had been struggling offensively and had been pretty weak against the run overall on defense. The first quarter opens up, and it ended up being Arizona punted, I believe, on their first two drives, while the Seahawks went down, were able to get a field goal with a lot of kind of first and 10, being able to get short passes into being able to run it on second and one, second and three. And eventually, you ended up at least with the Seattle Seahawks being able to kick a field goal from the Arizona 15-yard line. The third and four pass that was there to DK Metcalf was short. Cardinals punted again, and then it turned into a pretty quickly, at least seemed to be, that neither defense was going to be able to get a 3-and-out for the rest of the first half. After a couple of punts back and forth, Arizona was able to tie the game up, and then Seattle, of course, went on a touchdown drive. What stands out to you about that first half, Marcos? Because to me, the two things that stand out are when you're looking at 3rd and 8, you're not able to rush the passer. Gino just has all this time in the pocket, hits Tyler Lockett over the middle, picks up, I think it was 37 yards or so on the play at least, where it's just this huge chunk play because you can't get to the passer. They then were able to get Will Dissly on a blown coverage for touchdown. Cardinals are able to get a field goal, bringing it close, but after that, you've got 2 minutes left. Defense cannot get a stop again. The Seahawks end up getting a all the way down to the Arizona 11 with Gino on that huge run with about 16 seconds left. it felt like we're looking at this Cardinals team, and what you needed to essentially realize, I think, at some point was the offense in the first half just wasn't quite getting it done with some of these explosive runs we come to know them for. They needed some adjustments. The defense couldn't carry the offense. They at least kept it close within one score. But this felt like a game, at least, where what we've seen the Cardinals of the last few weeks is the offense has to carry the defense. And if they don't, then you have to kind of make these comebacks in the second half. And while Arizona did that, do you feel like that we've seen progress for this Arizona defense this year, or has it been still more of this negative where despite having, whether it's a solid plan or getting some stops, that they just have struggled? Because I feel like that you could make an argument for either case.
Yeah, it's kind of weird because this defense is not that much different as it was last year as far as like giving up the yards. Because I mean, you got to kind of give him credit for like not giving up too much on the points, but when it came to the yards and losing contain, that was the case, especially when that run that you were speaking about. I actually had that clip saved up from last night. I guess I didn't like cut it up or anything like that, but I know exactly what play you're talking about. And that play, they dropped. I believe they try to do like a corner blitz, so they shifted which side. You know, sometimes they'll show somebody at the line of scrimmage threatening to blitz, and they'll pull them into coverage. They'll put them into they'll have a spot drop, and then the person who is in coverage, like there'll be a safety over him. So what happened was I think Jalen Thompson was replacing the safety blitz, and they didn't get to the quarterback. The quarterback was able to leak to one direction and then gain like I think like 20 yards on that. And then of course that was where you had the assignment where I believe that Chris, what is the name, uh,
Oh, Chris Boyd?
Chris Barnes. Chris
Oh,
Barnes.
Barnes.
Chris
Barnes.
Barnes
Sorry.
passed off the assignment to Papo, and Papo picked up the running back instead of picking up the tight end, and then it became a blown coverage.
Yep.
We have seen that all year, and that's one thing that I am really concerned about. But yeah, there's some things that are just like kind of communication and commonsensical that kind of killed us, and that was what happened in the first half. Was if it wasn't for that miscommunication and had the communication been more thorough. Like that right there is called. And it's not a push call. It's called a. I'm not sure what the actual terminology was for that. I just think it's just passing off cover. There's a word for it, and he passed off the coverage assignment, pointed him out. Papo picked up the running back, and it became a wide open touchdown. So with that being said, after that, they were actually doing pretty well. And to be quite honest with you, the Cardinals defense has done pretty well. Like when it comes to like being able to defend Geno Smith. So that's how I felt. Like they were giving up yards but not points. So
Yeah. They held the Seahawks to a grand total of 41 points this year, which, when you're considering Arizona's defense overall, it's kind of both can say, yeah, it was a good job by the defensive performance. It is also, I think, a sign of where the Seattle Seahawks are in their current state. As far as offensive rankings go, we talked a little bit about this, at least with having Maddie Brown from the Seattle Overload podcast on. With their offense was not nearly as impactful as it was a year ago, which was probably part of the reason why we can at least talk about how with Pete Carroll, he's moving into either a different role or being a free agent, depending on what he chooses after this season. He is obviously in his 70s, older coach, still has the energy and that juice. But when you talk about the Seahawks last year, you were seeing Geno was an early MVP candidate, similar to Kyler. They had some injuries down the stretch. So what do they do this year? They bring back most of the guys that they had, including Kenneth Walker, who looked ready to explode. They add another running back to that depth. They draft Jackson Smith and Jigba, a lot of people's number one receiver last year. And he's now seen as like, hey, this is a guy who can be maybe the heir apparent to maybe not a deep threat speed guy as Tyler Lockett, but being able to kind of at least have that talent to be able to make plays over the middle. He had a disappointing rookie season. Overall, the amount of yards per game on offense this year The Seahawks were ranking somewhere about 25. The Cardinals, by the end of the year, were at like 23. So you're talking about, wow, remember how bad Arizona was earlier this year? And then they get Kyler Murray back. They start running the ball effectively. They're able to catch up and pass the Seahawks. Seahawks were only putting up, at least this season, a total of, I think it was here, about 21 points per game. So you're not one of the worst offenses in the league. The issue that came up, of course, for Seattle was that their defense was not anywhere near what we've come to expect of them from the Legion of Boom. The Seahawks defense ended up being one of the bottom thirds of the league. They'd usually give about 24 points a game. So you're talking about, hey, Cardinals are probably worse on defense overall. They're playing some better offenses. Seahawks are just not good enough on defense. And I do think that's part of the reason why, instead of coming back for one more year, they probably looked at the tea leaves and went, you know what? Pete Carroll's pretty old. We're probably going to have to, at some point, recognize we're going to move on. We're going to see if we can kind of make that decision early. It does seem like, and this is something I've seen from some of the Seattle fans, including Maddie, the team could possibly be for sale. We'll see in 2024, 2025 if that ends up being the case. But it seems kind of like Pete Carroll and John Schneider run a spot where it seems almost like, from what he said, the idea that Pete would take a step back, let John Schneider be able to kind of get his best opportunity to like run the team himself for a year, either for a future job or something. And then either he could move with the next type of owner. I don't know who that might be. Maybe Jeff Bezos. He's from that area. But this is also the end of an era, I think, for Seahawks football. Marcos, just looking at how this game, we'll talk about the kick here in a second, obviously, but this felt in a lot of ways like the way that the second half went. Cardinals, at least, are just running the ball up on Seattle. They get I think it's two touchdowns in the second half. Seahawks, punt, 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 4 punts in a row. What is it about Pete Carroll and the Seahawks team that makes them in the fourth quarter just go down, get a late touchdown, and then go for two, get two, take the lead over Arizona in the fourth quarter, and then somehow luck just happens to go the way of the Seahawks with those missed field goals? It was something we've seen all too often in Arizona, that the Seahawks would just either come into Arizona and rout the Cardinals, or if it was a close game, you would just see them somehow, some way, things would just happen to go the way of the Seahawks. And Pete Carroll, he would just win game after game in Cardinal Stadium each of those different years. Seeing the end of his era go out on one of those like last minute crazy type of victories, and that's the last game that we'll get to see from him, whereas Arizona, you kind of feel like this is a new era starting in the desert with Jonathan Gannon, a lot of Cardinals fans excited for what the team will do this offseason. It felt very much like a transition of power was taking place in the NFC West over the last couple of days. Kind of the sun setting on one era, sun rising in Arizona on another, despite the fact that the Cardinals could not put the Seahawks away, Marcos.
I don't know. Like, I have my thoughts about what happened in at that last quarter. Of course, like once they started moving the ball in the fourth quarter, it kind of seemed like it was gonna be meant to be, that they were gonna do something like drive down and score. And then that 2 point conversion, it seemed like they scored that way too easy, at least in my eyes, because the whole time that they were playing defense in a way of trying to like minimize those mistakes of leaving people wide open, and that's exactly what they did in that touchdown. After they scored that 2 point conversion, I was thinking to myself, this is like way too like scripted. That's what it feels like to me. I know people would say like, no, this is, and you know, you guys might be right. I'll be 100% wrong on this if I'm saying that, but that's how it feels. But he got his win, and in a way, it was kind of like bittersweet, as saying like, hey, he got his win, but then he probably knew he was gonna have to step it down, and that win also at least got the Cardinals to move down one spot, or just keep their spot in the, in the rankings, when it came, well, not in the rankings, in the draft order. So somewhat, like, it's not like it killed us, because we're not thinking any less of like where this team is going, with the exception of the pride being lost because we went ahead and just gave this game away. So
Right.
I guess it's just, hey, it was just bittersweet to just see him walk away like that.
Agree. Prater put up what could have been a Pro Bowl year if not for like, obviously Brandon Aubrey as a rookie kicker doing what he did, I think is super impressive. I do want to at least kind of highlight some of just those last couple of kicks that we have here because, like you said, situationally, I was in like acceptance point. Cardinals are going to pick fifth. We're watching, and at the same time, a couple of different games to see, hey, what's going on with the Packers? Chicago, are they able to get off a win against Green Bay's bad defense, and maybe Justin Fields has a chance? Okay, they're losing. All right, so Chicago might be taking a quarterback. That's going to be probably good news for the Cardinals. Hey, Giants were able to just whoop the Eagles. Turns out Cardinals were able to beat a team that can't really beat anybody. That's something at least that you're looking for. Of course, is win is a win. That's part of what we saw. Same thing goes for this game. You look at the Chargers. Oh, Chargers, they get that field goal to go ahead, but the Chiefs very quickly with, I think, Blaine Gabbert, Cardinals legend Blaine Gabbert, are about to kind of send Arizona into a rough spot. You get to the place where Arizona's about to go up 2 scores. Seattle's defense has just super struggled on the day. You have that first kick. You can at least see number 30. I believe it's Jackson. So Dante Jackson, at least. It's the other Jackson. I can't remember his name right now. Coming off of the edge. You can take a look at least here as far as with the kick and the hold. Kick and hold are fine. Ball just goes a little bit over to the this is the actually extra point, I think, at least, that they had for the most part.
Yeah, I believe this extra point.
Yeah, this is the one that they had for. This is the one here, at least, where you got 20-13. So the Cardinals are up by 1 score. They've got their kickoff, at least, that they have. And let's get to the actual kick here. There's the different view. So this is the Seahawks kick, actually. I forgot that they put both of those together at the same time.
Yeah.
Let me flip it here. Head. There's that kickoff to George. All right. 4th down, 5 to go, 20-13, 3 minutes left. So you know that this is probably going to be Cardinals can get a stop on defense, at least here. Even if Seattle scores a touchdown, they're going to have to get the onside kick. You can see 27, Tariq Woolen, I should say,
Woolen,
not Colin.
yeah.
Tariq Woolen comes off of the edge, no good on the field goal. When you look at this view here, you can kind of see at least with where it popped up for the most part. Elijah Wilkinson is late. Like, that's just one of the spots, at least, as far as the reaction. He is not hearing what's going on with the snap. He just gets kind of one hand, but there's 2 guys that are rushing from that side. This is the first kick where I'm like, you know what? I don't really blame Matt Prater for this kick because I at least am watching and seeing there's 2 guys that are on that side. They had overloaded one of the places. He just even groans like, oh, he knows that he missed it in that opportunity there. So that's the first kick that we're able to see. And Marcos, this is a spot where you realize, hey, Cardinals, even if they do end up, giving up a drive, it's probably still going to be a tie game. The 2-point conversion was one of those areas where watching it happening, it was like, all right, this is not fun. Because, like you said, there was not any pressure that happened. The Cardinals weren't really able to react. It was very quick. Guys wide open, at least there for the 2-pointer. You still, with Kyler Murray, are able to drive the ball all the way back down the field and have a chance to be able to actually win, which is like what we said. This should be, from all intents and purposes, a 4-4 record for Kyler Murray, if not for these 2 missed field goals by Matt Prater.
That should be one, yeah.
That's an encouragement, I think, at least for Cardinals fans. You can see here, this is where the Seahawks have the regular kickoff. Let's get to that final kick right here. You can see that they've got a different type of setup here. Not having people up over on the edge, you see that Arizona's prepared for that. They've actually got Trey McBride shifted out to that side now to make sure that there's plenty of help. I do not see Elijah Wilkinson over there, at least. He might be that he's over on the right side, but it looks like they've got a different setup where it's actually Hernandez, Paris Johnson, they've flipped things around for the most part, at least with having some of those guys here. So what the Seahawks at least have is they've got Bobby Wagner sitting up there. They're looking like they're going to be rushing more closer to the center. They get through the center on that one with number 20. This is Jordan Love, and Tariq Woolen also gets there. Let's take a look at this from the All-22 picture here. So you can see you've got Wilkinson now is on the right side. They've got at least a lot more players lined up over there. Prater's all set up. You've got 20 and 27. Now, if you're going to be a conspiracy theorist here, and, there's going to be people who are there that are going to talk about it as far as the kick, I think there's 2 things to look at. One is, here's your counter argument. Why would the Cardinals not just kick the ball on 4th and 5 versus go for it on 4th down and then have it to Trey McBride. Because if you're gonna, be tanking the game away, you just, hey, we're going for it on 4th down, Trey McBride. We're gonna throw it over his head. We're going
Hmm.
to have some sort of mess up so we don't score, or we're just gonna kick the field goal. We're not gonna go up by an entire touchdown. Seattle has the opportunity to go back down and be able to either tie or do something. That's the first one. But if you look at this designation here, Arizona flips everything around. They've now got Wilkinson on the right side. You've got Wolin on the other side. You got 20 Jordan, not Jordan Love, the other Love at least that they'll have there. The 35, he's again slow to react. They get the ball there. And you actually can see that he's got two guys that are there to block. They've given now the help to the other side. Bobby Wagner isn't even rushing for the most part. And by the time that he gets here, you can see that Love is starting to dive. It's still a missed kick. The first one, you can see the pressure gets there pretty quickly, and you're able to see that it's not that he blocks or not that it gets off. This one was just one where Prater just kind of pulled it a little bit over there. You can see where his body angle is. He's got the angle pulled just a little bit. So whether that was the penetration that was given up, this is still a place where as a kicker, guys just going to try to dive and hit the ball. You just have to still kick it straight, and they're not going to get a hand on it. And it gets past him, and you can see at least they just see that it was no good. We can probably get, I think we'll have one more look at it from the end zone angle approach here. So you'll be able to at least see, watch Prater as far as for where his footing goes, at least when he's right about on that side. He just kind of pulls it a little bit with his foot. And it's like, whatever you want to call it, at least for that one, they just, with missing it for Marvin Harrison, is I think what we can talk about here, Marcos. This was a kick that people are already talking about and saying it may be one of the more important kicks for the Arizona Cardinals because Matt Prater makes that kick. The Cardinals pick fifth. He makes either kick. There's probably a chance that the Cardinals end up going and winning that game. He misses both, and the Cardinals pick fourth in the NFL draft. It is something that's sad, I think, for Matt Prater, but a lot of Cardinals fans I know were relieved or even, in some cases, rooting for him to miss that kick.
Yeah, in a way, I was kind of feeling the same way. I was like, I mean, if he misses it, I think to myself, I've seen enough from this game to be able to say that this was a good game and this should have been a win. I mean, you don't miss two kicks and then think to yourself, well, that's like a 6 point change. So the score should have actually been when adjusted 26-21 or even like 23-21. So I mean, the Seahawks have to feel like, okay, well, we're lucky that they missed two kicks. So it doesn't matter to us. We're just trying to get a winning record on the season. And to the Cardinals, what would it matter to them if they get the win? They move up a spot in the draft, and this possibility that you move out of that crucial spot to where if three quarterbacks go in the top three, that fourth person might be Marvin Harrison Jr. You lose out of him, so maybe there was a little bit of incentive. Maybe it was just dumb luck. It was just, hey, you know, wasn't on when it comes to this kicking game.
Yeah, we've got 105 days until the NFL draft, but just kind of showing where things currently are set with it. We finally have the actual draft order for the teams that are not in the playoffs this year. You have Carolina, their pick belonging to Chicago. Chicago keeping their head coach, Matt Eberflus, but firing the offensive coordinator. So whatever quarterback is going to be the case here for the Chicago Bears, if they decide to keep Justin Fields, then he's going to have a new offensive coordinator. If you decide to move on from Justin Fields, you at least are looking at Luke Getsy and the performance they had this year and saying they probably were operating a little bit with some of those air raid spread concepts, not much of a not really that much of a quick passing game. It felt like it was deep bombs over to DJ Moore, over to the tight end, and it was screen passes that were not really working in their ground game. It was really Chicago's rushing attack with Fields and the running backs that was kind of part of their success this year outside of Moore and Komet. So, Marcos, this probably, at least with that loss this last week, I think that it seems more likely than not the Chicago Bears probably move on from the likes of Justin Fields, because if you're not gonna, you're probably gonna have to pay him. At least you're gonna have to pay him a little less than Daniel Jones and Kyler Murray from some of the production, at least, and he's gonna want a multi-year deal, obviously, versus getting a top quarterback who's probably going to be at least maybe a bit better upside. Washington, they also could use a quarterback. They probably don't lose out enough to get into the range for a Caleb Williams or their quarterback one, if that is it. He's from the Washington area. If there's any team that really tanked like the Arizona Cardinals did last year, Marcos losing like all of these games in a row, it would be Washington. They're going to get a new head coach. Maybe Ben Johnson, Ron Rivera is out. And then New England, of course, moving on from Bill Belichick. That is as of this morning. Long 24 years worth of dominance, followed by Mac Jones and some really less than stellar seasons in New England. I think that general manager, Bill Belichick, is unfortunately part of the issue there. They also are going to probably be looking for a new quarterback. That leaves you with the Arizona Cardinals, who could look for a receiver, picking one ahead of the LA Chargers, who, if you're looking at the Chargers this year, they probably are not going to be a team that's going to shy away from a wide receiver just because they took one last year. Quentin Johnson has been bad. He's been unable to really get any separation. He's dropped passes this year. He looks kind of like the traditional first round receiver bust right now. Unfortunately, we'll see if that changes, but Keenan Allen's getting up there in age. Mike Williams is getting up there in age. He's also pretty old. This is a team that I could see probably moving to a Marvin Harrison Jr. if they had the opportunity to. Just because it's like the Cardinals, you're moving off of Hollywood Brown most likely this year. I don't know if Marvin Harrison Jr. ends up being that much better than a Malik Neighbors, who has been more and more impressive the more that I think that people have watched the tape and talked about him. But you still feel pretty confident as a Cardinals fans that if they were going to miss it for Marv, this was probably the one game they could do so. What do you think, Marcos? Is this something where you think we're going to look back on this as a Cardinals fan and maybe through all of the pain that we went through, say that it was worth it for being able to get the best player in the draft? Or do you feel like we're going to look back at some of this season as maybe a change of the guard that Arizona wasn't able to maybe not get the highest quarterback, not be able to trade back for as many picks? What are some of your thoughts with the Cardinals down the stretch, at least for the most part, winning one game, losing the next one, and their draft status not really changing that much from where we had guessed it was going to be after the Eagles game?
I'm gonna look back at this in a positive way if and only if like we do. Let's just say I completely know that like there's more than one wide receiver in the first round and one receiver that's talented, and a lot of wide receivers are now just being on the taller side. They're starting to stray away from like this whole idea that the first round receiver should be like a 5'10", 5'11" receiver, and they're all over 6 foot or 6 foot. So if we get someone like Marvin Harrison Jr., for example, let's just say that's the pick. Like I mentioned this from the very beginning, that's what's going to probably maximize the ability for Kyler Murray to be able to throw more consistently to his receiver if his receiver is like 6'4" and he can like dominate these 5'11" cornerbacks. Because not every throw is going to have to be like a clean throw. Like more throws are going to be 50-50 balls. And if your number one receiver specializes in that, and if that maximizes, then I'll look back at this and think to myself, okay, well, it was a loss, but it was a loss going into some positive like steam going into
Yeah.
next year. Because I think you mentioned in your guys' stream yesterday on the making the grade stream that after this, if you gain a player like Marvin Harrison and Kyler Murray's stats don't change, don't get better, don't start ascending, or just we don't see the Kyler Murray that we expect to see with that big cap hit coming on, then you start thinking about maybe moving off. But I don't want to think about moving off until we get him that type of weapon, because I've seen what Kyler Murray does best. And what he does best is he throws to very big physical receivers very well.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's one of the thought processes that I've seen here, at least. And this is kind of a quick sharing, at least from this is the site manager at Revenge of the Birds. Seth Cox had some insight also into, like you said, about what happens with bigger targets. Biggest thing here, at least, is that in the red zone, the numbers with and without Hop are not that different. Like Kyler will still produce, he'll still be able to throw the balls within the 20s, he's still scramble, be able to get rushing yardage. But in the 2020 and 2021 seasons, even that Chargers game, he was just more productive. They were able to score in the red zone with Hopkins, having that big target. This is kind of something I think we talked about, at least overall, as when Kyler came back. was the impact that an athletic quarterback can have is not just in the passing game, but in running it into the end zone. We saw with James Conner and other players this year, you have a strong run game, getting the ball close, you can score. But if teams play the run, and you talk about those smaller guys who are there, you'd have to either A, get separation, which we've seen sometimes from players like Greg Dortch be able to do with scoring, or B, you're going to have one of those fade balls that throws it to the outside. You got a guy who can go up and snag it. And that was what we saw DeAndre Hopkins be for Kyler Murray. He then would draw attention away from other guys where you'd have to double him up. And that would then free up different guys who could get more open with one-on-one types of routes, at least, either underneath. Cardinals really in the passing game just had Trey McBride. Like, and if you're going to just have Trey McBride, teams at least can kind of know if you're going to be passing it down there, just kind of have two guys that you're bracketing with him. You're going to need to have the likes of a James Conner being able to get open. And in the first half, that was one of the big differences in the game was Cardinals did not manage to be able to get that here. Oh, I got your DMs open here for a second here. I was like, hey, Blake, give me the link. Anyway, he had 16 more touchdowns in one less game with DeAndre Hopkins. You're talking about, okay, Kyler plays this amount of games with Hop, this amount of games without Hops. He gets 16 more touchdowns. That's the impact of a wide receiver one. It's also the impact, I think, that you can see of having multiple weapons that you're able to throw to. It wasn't just DeAndre Hopkins. He had Christian Kirk. Zach Ertz, at least, had been healthy during some of that time. That was one of the things that I think that we saw, even with Hollywood Brown, when he was having that good start to his season. Cardinals were able to get to the red zone, but they were having to settle for field goals. They didn't have that large outside target. And Marcos, it feels like in a spot where you're talking about should the Cardinals, they're picking at four and Marvin's not there, do you go with an offensive lineman? Do you even just say, no, what? Doesn't matter who's there. We need to trade back, address more needs. We've got a lot of needs on the defensive side of the ball. It feels like things kind of almost work out perfectly. Like there's a phrase that says "ball don't lie," where it's like, hey, you're the Cardinals. You played every game to try to win it. You still end up with the Marvin Harrison Jr. Despite it all, you didn't like go ahead and tank it like you did in other seasons. It feels like that may be a reward for Cardinals fans if you're able to say we can fix some of these offensive problems with the likes of getting a top alpha wide receiver, maybe a guy who is top five in the game type of upside. That to me, I think, is probably the best case scenario for Cardinals fans this year, and why so many are happy despite the 4-13 record. You feel like they played hard, they were a tough out, they just need talent, but having the coaching in place, and I think that the best way to kind of put it is you got a coach who's going to go for it on fourth down, to go for the touchdown when he could take the lead with a field goal, and they get the touchdown. That is something I think, Marcos, that to me we got to see a lot of this season from Arizona to be able to kind of justify the moves that they made in the offseason of Monty Austin and Jonathan Gannon, and their decision to, instead of sitting him for a year, play Kyler Murray, despite the fact that you were able to win at least, I think it was 3 games with Kyler Murray this year, didn't end up costing you a shot at MHJ, which is great, I think, for everyone.
Well, we should have won 4. So like I'm gonna go ahead and call that last game a win, even if it's not a win on the box score, because if it comes down to the kicker, I'm like
Moral victory. Moral victory at its best.
Yeah.
You still get Marv, and you should have beaten the Seahawks, and it's Matt Prater just kind of cost it for you. Like, I'm fine with that.
Either that or he just gave us the biggest gifts. But I mean, it's however you want to look at it. I look at it as like if we get Marvin, then I'm like, oh, thank you for doing that, because we probably wouldn't get him otherwise. But I want to give a shout out to the other receivers as well, because I don't know if you saw the connection between him and Michael Wilson. I love the connection that I saw in this game, which is what I've been not only waiting for between Kyler Murray and Michael Wilson, but I started seeing a reliability with Kyler Murray looking for Michael Wilson down the field. One of the things that I've talked about and mostly haven't seen about Kyler Murray do is keep his eyes up while he's trying to scramble to see if he can find a wide open receiver. He did so today on 2 separate occasions where he saw Michael Wilson come back to the ball. He delivered the ball for a first down. That's what I want. That's the connection I want with him and Marvin Harrison as well. But Michael Wilson has now started getting that connection and started getting that trust, and both of them are starting to get like on one page. That's not what we've seen between him and Hollywood. We've seen that from him and Michael so far. Greg Dortch, like, he's been doing his job. Regardless of what's been going on with the receivers, he's at least continued to produce. So I like what we have going with that extra piece coming in, and hopefully being the X receiver, the number one, and then moving everybody, shifting them to better positions so that way they can succeed. Plus, Trey McBride. So I think this is a really good receiving core with the addition of that number one, hopefully from the draft. And just like you mentioned, what if Marvin's gone? Well, I believe we just trade back at that point. I think that maybe Neighbors could be worth it, but knowing Monty Awesome for it, I think this is one of those things where it's like, well, do I love him as much as I love Marv? Probably not. But if I have the ability to get a haul for this, I'm gonna do so, because you're right. We have more needs across the board, especially on defense. Oh, you're on mute.
Yeah, thank you. My dog was kind of whining a little bit, at least for the most part. He's going to have to get a walk in a little while. Speaking of taking a walk, at least, I did want to at least show some of the Cardinals' run game down the stretch, because I think in retrospect, we've seen there's been three R's that kind of define the Cardinals season outside of Kyler, which of course that's okay. Maybe it ends in an R, however you want to process that. The run game, the rookies, and the receivers. The run game, I think, counts for both sides of the ball. The Cardinals this year, I think, on the offensive side, when it came to being able to have a solid run game, we were able to at least see that run game become their identity when it got to the later weeks. I want to kind of show a little bit, at least here, of the play that we're going to see at least. So this is after the sack, at least, of Kyler, 2nd and 12. Cardinals at least are down. They had a penalty, I believe, on the play, which gave Arizona a first down. You can see here that they have a play action set up to Kyler. He throws a screen to James Conner, who makes his man miss and is able to rumble down the sideline, not just for the first down, but for a huge explosive play. One of the biggest things that I think we've seen in Arizona this year that's been helpful is, and this is something we went over on the Pro Football Focus podcast the other day, covering that with Cardinal Rule. Cardinals have had a screen game for the first time in years. Kyler to James Conner has been a lethal combination because James is a good receiver. When he's in coverage with one-on-one against the guys, you can't stop him with a safety, and he's faster than a linebacker. The other thing that we'll see is also the Cardinals were able to run down the field and get that touchdown in the fourth quarter with James Conner. But Marcos, seeing the Cardinals' run identity, seeing Conner finally, I think it was, he didn't get it on this play because he hit receiving. It's technically a screen pass, but to get that 1,000 yards receiving in just 14 games this season, huge accomplishment for him, and really just shows how good of a player he is for Arizona.
Yeah, I can't say enough about James Conner. And then obviously you see this completion to I can't for Higgins.
Higgins, play action fake, baby. Play action fake.
Yeah, from under center here. So like you suck the linebackers, and just typical leak tight end looking like he's gonna block, and then he leaks into like an out route. So that's leaving him wide open. And of course, like these guys are playing more the deep ball. So you see like the deep balls being double teamed, and so Higgins is underneath wide open, and Kyler Murray is able to deliver that ball. So like I like what I see here. One of the things that I want to mention about that last play, that was that design. It's a design running back dump off. So
Yep.
that one right there, Kyler Murray used to throw the ball a lot sooner. Right here, he actually held the ball longer, and he had to, because before, when he would get rid of the ball sooner, and mostly it was because he was afraid of the pressure.
Yeah.
So most of the time he would just try to like get rid of the ball right there, and then like James Conner would have to look for it and try to make a play at that moment. Well, he's not ready yet. But in this circumstance, he was ready. The blockers got in place, and he was able to get that big play. So that's a good design and good coaching right there.
The protections have been better than they were under Cliff. Like you said, Kyle would have to like drop back, hold, and then try to throw the screen. Here, he drops back, moves slightly to his left. The protections up front hold with the other blitzers. He's able to step up a quick second where he doesn't take that hit. And then, like you see here, blown coverage that takes place by, I believe it was Tariq Woolen here, blows the coverage. So you've got two guys in coverage down the field, at least for the most part. They both stick with the deep man. You can see that Kyler just is able to read, at least, that you've got him peeling open underneath. Love, at least, there is the one taking. And this is where I say with Zach Pascal, he hasn't produced as much. It's not been something there, but what the Cardinals have done is they've used him to be able to draw other guys open. So Pascal,
Over
despite
the
the fact
top.
that yeah, so right there, he's taking the over top route and is never designed for the ball to go to him unless he's completely wide open. Then the quarterback will just change that read and be able to throw it to him. The coverage sticks with him to take away that deep throw, but both guys stick with it. And then here you have, of course, on the next play here, this is one of the plays at least we wanted to be able to focus on with Will Hernandez as a blocker and then getting that lead block from Higgins. It frees James Conner. He breaks 1,000 yards, gets a touchdown. Storybook type of play right there for James Conner being able to get over to that spot. You can see here with the setup, you move tight end from one side to the other. This is where we talk about what we didn't see with the Cardinals, putting a man in motion, being able to identify the defense at the snap. No one moves over there to his side, so you know that they've got a zone type of play that they're running. They're going to then run both of him and Will Hernandez, and all of a sudden you can see, at least from the bodies count that's going on, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4 guys who are over there. Got 1, 2, 3 guys that are going to be over there on that side. Block, and he's gone. The safety, at least, is nowhere near. You end up with a total mismatch that you're able to get on the offensive side of the ball. Because the Seahawks, and this is part of with their defense with Pete Carroll and some of the other places, guys who are moving in motion, playing some of that zone coverage, teams have been changing to be able to get an advantage in the run game. Seahawks in this spot, you can see here, the safety moves over there with 8-4 to be able to cover him, and he just is late in being able to get to that spot. This is with, I believe, Quandre Diggs. Just not the best case for the Seahawks this year from the safety position. Love has been a good player, but they do lose Jamal Adams for a year. Quandre Diggs does not look nearly as explosive. And you're able to see Arizona make them pay by getting 2 bodies on 2 bodies. Connor just reads that, makes the man miss, and he is explosive enough to make it to the end zone. Just talking about how the run game, and then even the rookies this year, we got to see for Arizona. They did a good job in getting a lot of their rookies playing, but let's talk at least a little bit about the rookies before we kind of look at, just some of the coaching changes impacting, and then a quick thing on the
I was trying.
offseason. How did you
I was
feel
trying to
about
see
the?
if that was. I was trying to see if that was a GF lead on there because on
Mhm.
most of these plays, when you have a, a they were trying to attack the bubble in that circumstance. That's a Shanahan concept, and I was trying to see, and I wasn't paying attention to where the bubble was actually at. But if they were, that's GF lead, meaning like guard fullback pulling and then leading on to
Yeah.
open that wide open. So that's a good concept right there. And how I feel about the rookies. Well, I like the fact that they got all the snaps that they needed. That was one of the frustrating things that I had with the past like regime. I just didn't understand it. Like your rookies have to build your team. You have to know what you have with your rookies, and we never got to see what they had because we kept signing players out of like out of need to be able to fill holes. So it was just kind of like this floor that was just made out of like this house of cards in
Mhm.
some ways,
Yeah,
not no pun
literally.
intended. Yeah, exactly. Whereas like one piece gets taken out and everything tumbles, and that's how it is when you keep signing free agents that are just 1 year, 2 year rentals. So I loved how they constantly got snapped. So Garrett Williams, he kind of proved me wrong. I didn't think he was going to have an impactful first season. He was used as the apex mostly this year as the slob, but mostly the apex in that position because they had him switching around responsibilities in that middle part. They're doing the same thing that they're doing with Devin Witherspoon. He's playing a lot of the apex as well. They had Keytro on the outside. He was bounced in and out. I don't like that at all because I wasn't really that excited about what Thomas had to show us. I mean, he had some snaps where I kind of thought to myself he needs a little bit more development, but Keytrell showed a lot of physicality, and at the very least, even if his cover skills weren't that great, he was a good tackler, and he was a person who blew up a few screens. So you always need somebody like that on the field. Um, we have Paris Johnson. Paris Johnson now for one thing that I can say is that at least the markers going upwards, but we do have to face it that like we did move up to get this guy. We gave up capital,
Mhm.
and he was the fourth out of I think it was like 13 tackles taken in the draft. I think the tackles taken after him, like I think Skaronsi would have been a better pick for us because we needed more help on the guard area, and he was one of the better guards in the rookie class. And I think Broderick Jones was the best tackle taken in last year's draft. So sticking and picking, I would
Yeah,
have
at least for the
appreciated.
rookie seasons, I think for sure.
Yeah, but he is trending upwards, and his build is that build of an athletic tackle that would be great in the run game. That's why they place him on the right tackle side, because on the right tackle side, you have to be a road grader, good pass protector, but a good road grader in order to get this run game going. So maybe that's the reason why they stuck him on the right side and kept him on the right side. So at least he's bringing some value there as a good run blocker and stuff. So that's gonna pay dividends down the line. Michael Wilson, of course, I can't say enough about him. Maybe the production wasn't there, but because the connection wasn't always there, and plus he also had some games where he was out, but he showed me just enough to be able to say this guy can possibly be a 1,000-yard receiver. And I thought that before the season started. I think that way more now with the connection that he had with Kyler Murray.
Agreed.
I believe this Dante Stills is the only other notable one.
Yeah.
He showed more than he should have for a 7th round pick. Four sacks is incredible. Oe Papo is a person that I want to see used more on a blitzing circumstance, because his blitzing has to be elite because of the fact that he has that speed and he has that frame, but he still scares me when it comes to going backwards. It's kind of like what we say about linebackers. I don't have any issues with him going forward. It's going backwards where I have issues, and that's kind of held
Right.
true because he's been in a circumstances where he's hasn't picked up the responsibilities, and he kind of lets players run behind him in his zone, so he's not paying attention to that because he's taking the eye candy, like the motion up front. So maybe
Mm-hmm.
snaps will fix that, but I think he can be a starter next year. I hope that he gets more snaps just so we can get better evaluation. But towards the end, he was getting all those snaps, and hopefully that's a sign of like, hey, we're just gonna hand the reins off to him and see what we can do with them.
Yeah, and I think the other rookie that we forget about too is John Gaines, the 4th round pick. He did, of course, have a season-ending injury early on. The biggest thing, like you said, as far as when it came to the offensive line, it did look like, at least in hindsight, yeah, the Cardinals probably needed to get an offensive tackle. Whether or not Humphreys is the best from the class, we've at least been able to see so far he looks the part. He's not been able to grade out as like a top notch or an elite player, but he played every snap this season. And from the injury to DJ Humphreys, I think it seems very likely that either the team will bring in another left tackle and he'll still be in that spot, or he may just slide over to the other side. One thing, at least with the story of the season, wanted to kind of show here is, and this is kind of pretty easy to take a look at least just from obviously some of the PFF grades week by week. The narrative that you can kind of see here is on the offensive side of the ball, Arizona is pretty much below average for the most part across the board, but a good, maybe even great running game. As far as on the defensive side, coverage is up and down. The run defense, at least for the most part, is decent outside of the tackling in a couple of different games. And then you see, of course, here, it takes a huge hit against the Rams, the Niners, the Bears, top running defensive teams at this point. They did not have a lot of starters at the defensive tackle side. You're putting Dante Stills out there, at least as a 7th round rookie. And you look at how the offense goes from average to below average to not good with Clayton Tune in his one game to being pretty competent overall with Kyler Murray, with the exception, at least overall, of the Niners game. This is something, Marcos, that I think a lot of Cardinals are going to be looking at with when it comes to what we're exactly expecting for the offseason. I think the script is pretty much right here. You need to boost the offensive side because on the defense, especially the run defense, you're not that great. You need to upgrade guys at the defensive tackle spot. You're going to have to probably bring in another starting linebacker to be able to pair with Kaiser White coming off of injury. He was probably the biggest injury to any Cardinals player, I think, this year. That was the most impactful, besides Kyler Murray, obviously. And at least when it comes to with expectations for the offseason, a lot of it, I think, is going to be just adding talent. Is there anything at least you have thoughts on, at least, and then we can do a quick check-in with, just some of the coaches or other stuff for the offseason, because it's going to be wild to see if any Cardinals coaches do get poached by other teams, given some of how that team, which was a 4-win team, still was probably more successful than they had any right to be when it's all said and done.
Well, we're gonna go over this. I'm not sure when we're gonna be able to compile the stats, but for everybody who's watching and listening, we're gonna do a big, review on Kyler Murray sometime. And I think we just need to give ourselves enough time to review, get enough stats, and get enough film on that, for the 6th game. So that's what I'm looking forward to, Blake, because I'm trying to compile that. I think obviously everybody's interested in that to see what is great, what is success, and what his weaknesses were. And I mean, this offseason can only go bode well for him picking up the offense, especially with this, personnel and stuff. So that's one thing I am looking forward to. And when we're able to compile that, guys, that's going to be a stream that you guys would want to watch.
That's going to be great. Yes. All right. And that'll wrap it up for us with our show today for the most part. I'll be having an article coming up here with Revenge of the Birds that talks about winners and losers from the entire 2024 season, as well as kind of a in-depth look at what Kyler Murray did, where he did well, where he needs to improve, if there's warning signs that we at least are seeing from it, or if there's positive signs that are like giving Cardinals fans confidence heading into next year. Marcos, if you want to go ahead and shout out some of your content that you do, as well as where listeners can find you.
You guys can find me at Pancake Soul on X, and of course AZ Sports Underground.
Absolutely. Hey, thank you guys so much again for joining us for this season. We'll be back with one more show, kind of with our wrap up for the most part, with our season finale there on Saturday. We'll probably shift to, unless there's more news, more of like a one show a week type of approach in the off season. We'll have different guests on. Maybe we'll have 2 shows a week depending on what happens with the Cardinals. Is obviously we've got a bunch of things coming up. There's the combine, you've got free agency, and of course the 2024 NFL draft. Thank you guys again so much for tuning in. This has been the Redbird Reboot. It's time for us to log off. Take care, everyone.
See you guys.